live? How about now? Okay. So this group of women hiked the Appalachian Trail, but they did it over a period of years and started when they were considerably younger than we are today and finished when they were considerably younger than we are today. But they were not as young as when they started, obviously. So I thought I would read you a little bit about who they were when they started and then just sections of the book that I thought were interesting. So the women are these. Charmaine Burns was known for her open heart and open house. Charmaine and her husband live in Gainesville, Florida, and they can often be found with friends and family at the Swanee River. They have three grown sons. Yes. You know them? Oh my word. Who would have thought? Wow. Wow. Next person. Let's see if somebody knows them. Sylvia Crump, a Florida native, Sylvia and her husband are citrus growers in the Leon Springs. Both are active in Florida Farm Bureau, and they have two grown sons. Ellen Kilpatrick. Ellen has recently moved from Florida back to her native Michigan. She enjoys traveling and can usually be found cruising U.S. highways. You know her too? She has two grown sons. Mary Fenig. Mary and her husband reside on a farm in southeastern Indiana. They used to raise hogs and now ride them. Their goal is to ride their Harleys in all 50 states. They have a grown son and daughter. Bunny Schneider and her husband, Jack, live in Bradenton, Florida. They fill their weekends with birding and canoeing and enjoy foreign travel. They have a grown son and daughter, and one who is got more to say about amazing Grace Tyner. Grace Tyner was and is amazing. When we began hiking, she was the oldest mama by 10 years. She was also the only one with backpacking experience, top of the line equipment, and knowledge of the Appalachian Trail. From the moment we were all gathered in Joanne's station wagon, Grace entertained us with her stories. It was hard to know if these tales were true or not. But if true, she had a strange collection of friends. These tall tales were interspersed with stories about growing up on a farm in Iowa, getting to college on scholarships, wild times as a single woman studying in Europe, life as a career military man's wife, and being a Girl Scout leader. She also had wonderful reminiscence about hikes with the Carolina Mountain Club and spending summers at Cattail Creek in North Carolina. Grace was a treasure trove of information and quickly became our mentor and our conscience. She made sure we set up tents properly, burned all trash we were not packing out, and left every campsite better than when we found it. No matter what was needed, she seemed to have it in her pack. The time she pulled out a collapsible saw to cut firewood was a moment to remember. She also had a compass, a flashlight that worked, aspirin, plastic bags, dry socks, matching outfits, and a great sense of humor. For years, Amazing Grace was with us on every hike. She continued to entertain us and enforce wilderness protocol, though we needed less instruction as the years passed. When recurring knee problems made it necessary for Grace to bail out and leave the trail, it became clear we were going to be a group of five instead of six. She kept valiantly trying to hike, but the year she arrived at the Hanover, New Hampshire airport walking with a limp, we all began to accept the fact that Amazing Grace might need to abandon the trail. On day two of a hike through the White Mountains, she hiked out of the wilderness and returned home, and thus we became five. As one can imagine, Amazing Grace misses her knees, and the mamas miss having Amazing Grace on the trail with us. Down to the final five, we hiked the Appalachian Trail from Springer Mountain, Georgia to Mount Katahdin, Maine. Little did we know when we were stepping off on a 21-year adventure. The odyssey began in Bradenton, Florida, when church friends Bunny Schneider, and Sylvia Crump decided to find four women who enjoyed the out of doors and might like to take a fall hike on a short section of the Appalachian Trail in the mountains of North Georgia. Bunny invited her friend, Grace Tyner, a Girl Scout leader from Sarasota, and her sister, Charmaine Burns, from Gainesville, Florida. Charmaine knew that her friend, Ellen Kilpatrick, would jump at the chance to go. In hopes of being included, Joanne Elton bought hiking boots and began walking the streets of Bradenton with a pack on her back. When she offered to drive her 6-passenger station wagon, Joanne was in. Bunny, Sylvia, Grace, Joanne, Charmy, and Ellen. These were the original 6 mamas. Some of us had never walked through the woods, put up a tent, started a campfire, crossed a creek on a log, but now we were on a mission. We didn't know. We didn't know where the trail officially started and ended. We didn't know the trail was over 2,000 miles long. We didn't know that it would take an estimated 5 million steps to walk from Georgia to Maine. We didn't know that the ascents and descents of hiking the Appalachian Trail would be the equivalent of climbing Mount Everest 18 times. As the Taoist saying goes, a 1,000-mile journey begins with a single step. We simply put foot A in front of foot B and kept going. An ordinary phone call can have a lasting effect on your life. When my sister Bunny called me on a Saturday afternoon in October to tell me that she and her friend had just returned from a leadership training program with the Girl Scouts in northeastern Georgia, I was not terribly impressed. When she gushed, "It was so much fun. You and I have to go to Standing Indian with some friends next fall and backpack." I rolled my eyes and thought, that sounds nice. My children were 4, 7, and 9 years old, and my professor husband was not the take over the home front type. So, a week of camping and backpacking with a few women did not seem likely. My camping experience was limited to our younger brother's tent in the backyard. I was never athletic, particularly interested in the outdoors, nor inclined to do anything that might cause me to sweat. However, it did sound like fun to go and see the fall leaves, and it was a year away. So I pretended to be interested and told my husband that my eccentric sister had this crazy idea and got back to fixing dinner. Sometimes the brain just takes off on its own and starts thinking through the details of a daydream. If you backpack, you have to have a pack. Hiking boots. Be in good shape. Carry everything you need. Know how to build a fire. Find water. Sleep in a tent. And who knew what else? The first challenge was to get fit for hiking. That sounded very impressive to me. I purchased some running shoes, dusted off my bicycle, and started on an exercise routine. Why anyone would want to jog around the neighborhood and sweat was beyond my comprehension. However, by the time I got up to 2 miles a day, I thought it was a pretty cool thing to be able to do. A 4-mile walk to Sears for a blue Hillary backpack and leather work boots, iodine pills from the outdoor equipment store for purifying water, and several trips to the library for reference books, and I was ready to hit the trail. If you have an idea you want to do something, start talking about it, and it takes on a life of its own. When my friend Ellen started walking past our house in her new hiking boots, I took the hint and invited her. This was now a group of 6 for the adventure. I want to read some other things to you, so I'm going to cut some of this short. Mount Kinsman in New Hampshire will always be one of our most memorable days on the trail. That July morning, we poked our heads out from our sleeping bag cocoons. We let out a collective groan. It was raining, cats and dogs. We could see our breath, and we knew we had a tough hike over Mount Kinsman that day. On schedule, at 7 a.m. in the deluge, we hit the rocky, slippery, steep footpath. The The continuous downpour had created a cascading waterfall plunging down the steep trail that at times nearly swept all of us off our feet. We didn't stop hiking until noon, then sitting on rocks inside black plastic garbage bags to protect from the cold rain, we gulped down cheese, crackers, and gorp. A mother and son duo were the only hikers we met that day. The mother, who appeared to be our age, was smiling broadly and full of animated chatter. We were breathing so hard we couldn't speak, other than a few grunts about, ain't this awful? Wonder Woman disagreed. She thought it was fun, fun, fun. I guess if you're hiking with your 20 something son, you have to put on a brave face. With pruned fingers grasping roots and rocks, we crawled up the mountain on all fours. After 6 hours, we finally came to the Kinsman Pond campsite, a place level enough for a few tent platforms. The mountaintop was shrouded in fog, the temperature hovered in the 40s, and the rain was relentless. We could barely work our stiff fingers to put up tents. In the confusion of erecting tents in the rain, I suffered some serious equipment loss. A stuff bag was left outside on the ground, and as a result of my negligence, my pills and toilet paper dissolved, and my flashlight and matches died. I put on dry camp clothes, wrapped up in an aluminum foil emergency bag, and snuggled down in my sleeping bag. It took about an hour to stop shivering and get feeling back into my hands. We all slept a few hours and awoke feeling hungry and desolate on that cold, wet, fog-enshrouded, inhospitable mountain. I quickly volunteered to go to the pond for water, thus assuring myself of everyone's gratitude so I could bum some toilet paper. No one's lighter worked, and my matches were history, so it was a cold supper. After eating with spirits revived, the green tent mamas had a party for the yellow tent mamas. They had two separate tents. And Mary provided the refreshments from her bountiful candy bag. Now, as we reflect on our years of hiking the Appalachian Trail, someone inevitably says, remember that horrific day on Mount Kinsman. We all moan and groan and recall how much we suffered, but we have big smiles. We get more and more animated, recalling the frozen fingers, the fear of falling, and peeing pants. Soon we are laughing riotously in retrospect. The things that challenge us the most seem to be the best trail memories. And I think that's sometimes true of life, too, as a matter of fact. Mount Katahdin. After a few years of section hiking, we jumped up to Maine because at the rate we were going, if we put it off too many years, we might not be able to climb Mount Katahdin, the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. Mount Katahdin, an isolated granite monolith that rises 4,000 feet from the forest floor, is Maine's highest mountain and the grand finale for the south to north end-to-end hikers. The night before our big climb, we stayed in the bunkhouse at Katahdin Stream Campground. Having hiked the previous 10 days through Maine's 100-mile wilderness, it was a luxury to be in a bunkhouse, even if the only amenity was a wood stove. Too excited to sleep, we were up at sunrise and ready to start the hardest climb of our lives. Carrying a day pack with lunch, water, and rain gear, we set off with song, I'm happy when I'm hiking. To climb Katahdin from campground involves a climb of 4,156 feet over the most challenging footway we'd ever encountered. Struggling up and over tremendous boulders, there was no vegetation for the hiker to grasp for assists. Iron handholds strategically placed for long-legged big people were often useless for us. I was frequently pushed, tugged, and dragged up and over the steepest and largest rock formations. We couldn't believe it. The white trail blazing markings were going from one giant boulder to another and into space. For several hours, we crawled and climbed and over an impossible obstacle course. Upon reaching the plateau at Thoreau Springs, there was a respite from the frightening climbing, but the weather turned foul, and we had another battle. The temperature dropped, it began sleeting, and thick clouds obscured any view. Being above the tree line, rock cairns marking the trail were barely visible. The gusting, howling wind made it difficult to stay on course and on our feet. We struggled across the rocky boulder field, had another climb, and then we spied the weathered wood sign proclaiming the summit of Mount Katahdin and the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. Quickly, we gathered around the sign for a group picture. Then we hunkered down in the lee of some protecting rocks and hastily ate our lunches. The whipping wind, rain, sleet, snow, and fatigue had deadened our enthusiasm for any additional time on the summit. Our plan had been to descend by way of the narrow knife edge trail, but weather conditions were such that the trail was closed. Instead, we headed down the Apple Slide Trail, a frighteningly precipitous, rocky, slippery path. Charme held back to lend me a hand. This is Bunny talking. I, being the shortest and the slowest, was on my derriere more than on my feet. As I cowered on a ledge just below Charme hollered assistance reassurance. It's okay. Just drop your walking stick and you'll see where you will land when you jump down. I dutifully dropped my walking stick and with horror saw it bounce next to Charme and drop hundreds of feet to the boulders below. Battered, frazzled, and totally exhausted, we made our way off the mountain and back to the bunkhouse as the sun was setting. We built a fire on the stove, changed to dry clothes, ate, and gradually our bodies warmed up. Charme made a general announcement. There are some things that cannot be rushed, and the making of good cheese, the making of fine wine, and Bunny going downhill. For some, Mount Katahdin is the beginning of a hike southward. For others, it is the ending of a hike northward. For us, it was a validation of our ability to actually hike from Georgia to Maine. Our grand finale would come 13 years later when we hiked our final section, ending at Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. Having successfully climbed the most difficult mountain on the entire trail, Mount Katahdin, we knew we had the grit to complete the Appalachian Trail and all 5 million steps. Just as William O. Douglas completed section hiking the Appalachian Trail in 1958, becoming the 18th 2,000 miler. In Of Men and Mountains, Justice Douglas' account of growing up, he wrote, I learned early that the richness of life is found in adventure. Adventure calls on all the faculties of mind and spirit. It develops self-reliance and independence. Life then teems with excitement. But man is not ready for adventure unless he is rid of fear, because fear confines him and limits his scope. He stays tethered by strings of doubt and indecision and has only a small and narrow world to explore. Adventure requires moving beyond the comfortable known, your own family, friends, house, community, your own route to work, your weekly routine, your own grocery store, your own language, value system, religion. Not only are the knowns comfortable, but they are also right. Why then would anyone choose to exchange the security of the known for the insecurity of the unknown? Why would we choose to venture beyond our comfort zones? Our first Maine trip loomed as an incredible challenge, and there I encountered Chairback Mountain. My stomach knotted as I stood on a cliff looking down at the ladder I would have to climb down to reach the bottom. I watched apprehensively as each mama fearfully struggled to descend the long, wet, rotting, wobbly, unstable ladder with its unevenly spaced, slippery rungs. I could not possibly follow. But eventually, I was the last woman standing at the top. My turn had come. From below, the others offered myriad suggestions, then let me lower my full backpack down to them by rope. Out of respect for my fear, they waited out of sight for me to conquer this challenge. I took many deep breaths, emptied my lungs loudly, talked to myself, and finally turned around and holding my breath, I closed my eyes and cautiously extended my leg over the edge of the cliff to locate the first rung. Don't look down, I told myself. Just hold on and feel for the next rung. Go slowly. Remember, just one careful step at a time. Many other hikers have descended here, and you can do it too. Feeling like a coward for having been paralyzed at the top and feeling like a conqueror for at last reaching the bottom, I joined my friends. I too had arrived under my own steam. Never did anyone ridicule my plight that day or since. Rather, they congratulated me on overcoming the day's fear, meeting my challenge. There have been many similar moments, our 2,000 miles of hiking, and can claim progress in overcoming my fear of heights, but it may never fully subside. However, I continue to think of all I would have missed if I had accepted defeat and backtracked to leave the tail that day. All right. Time marches on. Change is inevitable. Some would even term it progress, and it certainly has been evident as the mamas have lived on the trail each hiking season. When we began as attractive 30 something young mothers, we didn't discuss having problems. Absolutely no one had killer blisters, sore muscles, tense shoulders, numb fingers or toes, or lower back pain. Our conversations were always upbeat, relatively intelligent, grammatically correct, and humorous. We told about our competent children, our successful husbands, our interesting friends, our congenial families, and our upcoming vacations. After all, we were just getting to know each other. The hiker with short legs never muttered about having to walk twice as many steps just to keep up with us, nor did she complain about how short her rest stops were compared to ours. There was no hint that anyone found sleeping difficult when sandwiched between mamas, or that snoring, sometimes in chorus, interrupted the calm of the night outdoors. And early on, we never faulted the night critters for scavenging in our packs for food or nesting material while we tried to sleep, or for leaving evidence of their route for us to follow in the morning. It seemingly didn't bother anyone to venture out of a warm sleeping bag during the night to pee in the woods, sounds, critters, and all. If yours was an unlucky draw that meant you slept next to the wall in a mouse infested shelter, or perhaps next to a sniffy hiker again, you merely did what you knew was expected of you. After all, you were up to the challenge. It's hard to recall exactly when the change occurred, but over time we began to level with each other more readily. Now the blisters, sore feet, aching muscles, and hunger pangs are topic of conversation almost from day one. When the night sounds are disturbing, you'll now hear someone quietly suggesting that the offender roll over or even wake up and try a fresh start. If someone claims not to have slept, witnesses immediately mark out a challenge. And if a mouse dares to invade a pack while we're awake, he is likely to have the invasion interrupted by a flying boot. We still have occasional unlucky draws, but you'll definitely hear the instant groan followed by a paragraph of complaint from Mrs. Unlucky. Over the years, not only have we become vocal about trail discomforts, but we are also unreserved about bringing up myriad political, environmental, and religious topics. Nothing is off limits to discuss, and we are no longer PC. Of course, we have long learned over the years how long to discuss controversial topics. And when we have heard enough opinion or someone's dander is becoming apparent, we call a truce. Never do we want to offend each other or taint the special atmosphere we all treasure. After all, our relationship is not about winning points, but about loving life. We have gone from being young mothers to being grandmothers. We continue to stay abreast of the changes in each family between hikes and lend moral support when life's difficulties appear. Now it is not your own little ones we share tales about, but the next generation of young'uns, the offspring of those we left for a week or two in the care of fathers and friends. Just think of what the trail has meant to us. There is just one topic that is always fully discussed each time before we go home, and that is the date and location for our next gathering. Because of this, we have indeed gotten to know each other over the years. Most end to end AT hikers complete their odyssey at the trail's northern terminus, Mount Katahdin, in Baxter State Park in Maine. We completed the final section of our end to end at the Blackburn Trail Center near the historic little town of Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. Located at the confluence of the Shenandoah and Potomac rivers, described by Thomas Jefferson as the loveliest view in America, Harpers Ferry is the home of the Appalachian Trail Conference headquarters. Our 27th and final AT hike was a poignant time of elation and a bit of sadness, for it was bittersweet to have the journey end. As the saying goes, it's not the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, it's the journey. Our final section hike was in June, with most of the miles being within the Shenandoah National Park, which meant we met record numbers of hikers. Word spread on the trail grapevine that this was the Mountain Marching Mama's final hike. And being a group of 5 middle aged women, it wasn't hard for hikers to identify us. All seemed so respectful of what we had accomplished. It was humbling to have these robust young people want to hear about our experience and say things like, I'm going to tell my grandmama and my mom about you. Many urged us to write a book. We shrugged off the suggestion, saying we hadn't done anything special. After all, given enough time, a monkey could type the Encyclopedia Britannica, and given enough time, a group of middle aged women could walk from Georgia to Maine. In late October, Bunny received a telephone call from Hedgehog asking each mama to send $500, and he would start planning our next summer's trip. We couldn't wait to send him the money. It was after sending the money that the husbands, Tim and Bruce, questioned, who is this man in England? We then realized that only Bunny knew his real name. Good grief, after only spending one wet night in the Appalachian Trail shelter with this man, we had joined the International Youth Hostel Association, sent him $500, and bought $900 worth of non-refundable round-trip airline tickets to Manchester, England. Not one of us could have picked him out of a police lineup. Tingling with excitement and enthusiasm and maybe just a hint of fear that this mere acquaintance may have taken our money and run, in July, we boarded a plane for Manchester, England. Since completing the Appalachian Trail, we have hiked in England twice, the Coast to Coast Trail and section of the Leeds to Liverpool towpath. Visited and hiked to archaeological sites in Greece and Crete, hiked in Colorado, Michigan, and other parts of the Florida Trail. We have canoed sections of the Buffalo River in Arkansas and paddled the Swanee River from its source in the Okefenokee to the Gulf of Mexico. Our most recent adventure was hiking and camping in Lake Superior's Isle Royale National Park, and next we plan to explore trails in North Dakota. Despite knee replacements and orthotics, we are proud to be in pretty good shape considering the shape we are in. And that's the end of the book. So you taught with her, with Charmaine. Yeah, yes. Would you all be interested in taking it from me? I'll give it to you and you can read it. There's a lot more here. So you knew she was doing this. Oh my gosh. Well, who would have thought? Because I had other things I thought about reading. It was fate for me to read this so I could give it to you. So I think I was supposed to be on for 30 minutes. Hmm? It's always up. As in the trail is always up. Yeah. They would, yeah. and they would decide what section they were going to hike. Their husbands came and met them, um, often at the end, and bring, or in between when they were hiking, and bring them extra supplies, that sort of thing. Um, I'm sure some of you have known through hikers. I've known a couple. They were in their 20s, and it was a feat for them to do it, even at that age. Yeah. So what they did was, yeah, they went every year for 21 years, and sometimes they hiked a week, and sometimes they hiked for 2 weeks. Sometimes they had a little bit longer period, but mostly it was in periods of a week to 2 weeks. Yeah, 21 years. So when they started, they were, moms in their in their 30s, and by the time they finished, they had grandchildren. And she talks in here one time that she left to go on the hike, and they were gone for a month that time. And her son had been dating this lovely young woman that they thought was going to be his bride. Came back, and he had taken up with another woman who had a child. And she talked about what an adjustment that had been, but what a blessing it had been. That they loved her dearly, and they loved the children. They now have children of their own, this couple, and lots of stuff like that. Yes, they had trail names all the way through. I didn't take time to read that. I had to cut things. I never had a trail name. I never did all that. I wasn't ever good enough. Remember, I came from Florida where it was flat, so I could fly. I can hike in sand, and I can hike when it's hot. Or I could then. I couldn't now. And I did some backpacking in Florida, and I came up here once and joined my son who was at Duke, and we hiked in Western North Carolina, and that was an experience for this flatlander tourist to suddenly discover it's always up. Thank you.